Good afternoon, I'm Karen Holmes Ward. Welcome to Cityline. Later in the program, the royal presence of one of history's most famous kings will soon be felt in Boston. First, the Supreme Court nomination of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson.
My grandparents, who didn't have a lot of formal education, but who were the hardest working people I've ever known, and who just got up every day and put one foot after the other and provided for their families and made sure that their children went to college, even though they never had those opportunities. I reflect on them in the context of this historic moment. I stand on the shoulders of people from that generation, and I focus at times on my faith when I'm going through hard times. Those are the kinds of things that I learned from my grandmother, who used to have those family dinners and bring us all together. And I think that's a common experience of Americans, that when you go through difficult times, you lean into family and you turn to faith. And that's part of my experience as well.
And joining me now is Angela Onwuachi-Willig, the Dean of Boston University School of Law. The Dean organized a group of more than 200 Black women law deans and professors, urging the Senate to confirm Brown Jackson. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson faced hours of questions from members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Dean Willig, Republicans scrutinizing her previous rulings and sentences, and at times perhaps misrepresenting them. In your opinion, what was flawed about the way Judge Brown Jackson's legal career was being analyzed and presented?
Well, I think she noted it herself many times, that they were taking her entire record as a judge, 9 years of work as a judge, and reducing them to a few opinions, and not even looking at the full context, the full everything that she was looking at and considering and making her decisions in those cases. She's authored nearly 600 opinions, and they were centered on, a few, 9 at most, but really just a couple of them. And so to reduce her to a couple of cases when she's presided over many, many more and has written 600 opinions was really surprising, although not shocking, I guess. And the one thing I would say, too, is some of the dog whistling that was involved in some of the comments. I mean, the notion that she would be soft on crime. She's got the backing of the largest police organization in the nation, and yet they somehow think that she would be soft on crime. Not something I would expect her to have support from the Fraternal Order of Police if she was so soft on crime.
And Dean Onwuachi-Willig, we should point out also that Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson had one of the lowest rates of reversals of any judge in her district. Is that true?
Absolutely. Less than 2% of her cases were reversed when she was a federal district court judge, which is a really phenomenal record. So to even say, right, if she was really, truly somebody who was outside the mainstream, she would have been overturned far more than less than 2% of the cases that
All right. Let's listen to Texas Senator Ted Cruz's line of questioning on the issue of critical race theory.
Do you agree with this book that is being taught with kids that babies are racist?
Senator, I do not believe that any child should be made to feel as though they are racist, or though they are not valued, or though they are less than, that they're victims, that they are oppressors. I don't believe in any of that. But what I will say is that when you asked me whether or not this was taught in schools, critical race theory, my understanding is that critical race theory as an academic theory is taught in law schools. And to the extent that you were asking the question, I understood you to be addressing public schools. Georgetown Day School, just like the religious school that Justice Barrett was on the board of, is a private school.
And the author of that children's book, BU's director of the Center for Anti-Racist Research, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, did respond, tweeting, "You know Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson has impeccable credentials, and you know you're doing the work when at Ted Cruz questions her about your book since he can't touch her record." Very interesting tweet. In your opinion, did Judge Brown Jackson disarm or deflect some of the misleading attacks from the Republican senators? There was that pause there in the middle of her response.
I thought she did a spectacular job, and many people have joked that that pause was, a moment at which she was wondering whether she should risk it all in responding to Senator Cruz. But I thought she did a spectacular job throughout the more than 15 hours and 20 hours of questioning. She was calm. She was pure grace under fire. She was brilliant. It was clear from the way she answered her questions. She was somebody who carefully followed the law. And there was no question about it that she has the appropriate judicial temperament, the appropriate, firepower, intellectual power. She is more than qualified to be on the bench, as Senator Booker said. Right, she has earned that spot. I thought she did a phenomenal job, and I bet that Dr. Kendi is also thanking Senator Cruz today for increasing the sales in his book.
And there was a moment when New Jersey Democrat Cory Booker moved her to tears.
It's hard for me not to look at you and not see my mom, not to see my cousins, one of them who had to come here and sit behind you. You have earned this spot. You are worthy.
Witnesses come in.
Now, you've written several op-ed pieces in support of Judge Brown Jackson. So what is it about her lived experience that you think makes her the perfect pick for the Supreme Court?
I mean, there's so much about her lived experience. Number one, her experiences as a Black woman, as a Black mother, her experiences as a public defender. She'll be the first public defender to sit on the Supreme Court. But in my op-ed, I was writing about the Fourth Amendment cases. And as we know, there's disproportionate stopping, there's disproportionate killings of African Americans by the police. There's a different experience, a radically different experience that Black people and, for example, white people have in terms of how they experience policing in this country. And one of the things that I think that she could bring real insights to is putting that reality, making aware that disparity. Because one of the things you see in the Fourth Amendment cases is that because the justices have largely been white men, you see their experience being put into the law, really embedded in the law as a normative experience of all people. So something like a consensual encounter. It's assumed that there is something like a consensual encounter, that police can stop you, question you, ask for your ID, do all those things without articulating any suspicion, without having any suspicion, reasonable suspicion at all. And they can do that, and it's considered a consensual encounter so long as you feel free to leave or stop the encounter. Well, there is not one situation in which I could say that any Black person reasonably feels free to leave or stop an encounter with police, even when it's based on nothing, because that could be a death sentence. And we've known that for decades. And I think there was an awakening in this country where people finally began to realize that in 2020. And yet that's embedded in the law. It's a legal fiction for African Americans. And yet so many cases are analyzed with that as a starting point.
And she will bring that experience with her should she be confirmed for the Supreme Court. Dean Onwuachi Willock, thank you for being here, Dean of the BU School of Law. Up next, watching the hearings through the eyes of a Black woman at the top of her field and a student at the beginning of her own journey.